On the afternoon of April 6, 1945, a massive shape began to move through the Bungo Strait. It was a monster. It displaced 72,000 tons. It was 862 feet long. It carried 9 massive guns, each one weighing more than the entire space shuttle. It was the Yamato, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the symbol of Japan itself. The order was simple. It was madness. But it was simple. Proceed to Okinawa. Attack the American fleet. Beach the ship. Fight until the last shell is fired. Then die. On the bridge of the largest warship ever built, Vice Admiral Saiichi Ito looked out at the gloom. He was 54 years old. He was a rational man, a student of logistics. He knew the fuel bunkers below his feet were only half full. He knew there were no aircraft carriers to protect him. He knew that the American radar was already tracking him, watching him like a hawk, watching a dying mouse. This was not a mission. It was a funeral procession. The ship beneath him was the Yamato. 72,000 tons of hardened steel, 862 feet of imperial ambition, the most powerful machine the Japanese Empire had ever created. And it was sailing to its death. Below decks, 3,332 men were preparing to die. They were not panicked. They were resigned. In the dimly lit mess halls, young ensigns were cutting off locks of their fingernails. They were wrapping them in white paper. They were writing their final letters home. "Mother, forgive me for not returning. I go to become a guardian of the Empire." They drank the Emperor's sake. They toasted the ship. They knew the truth that the High Command in Tokyo refused to admit. The war was lost. The Empire was burning. But the Yamato could not surrender. A samurai does not surrender. A samurai dies by the sword. And the Yamato was the greatest sword ever forged. This is not just the story of a ship sinking. This is the story of a nation that built a monster to save itself, only to feed its own sons to it. This is the story of Operation Tengo, the suicide voyage of the battleship Yamato. To understand the death of the Yamato, we must go back to its birth. It was born from fear. In the 1930s, the Japanese Imperial Navy faced a terrifying math problem. The United States had more steel, more oil, more factories, more money. If Japan tried to match the US Navy ship for ship, they would lose. They could not win a building race. So the strategists in Tokyo came up with a different plan. Quality over quantity. If they couldn't build more battleships, they would build bigger ones. They would build a ship so massive, so heavily armoured, and so gunned, that no American ship could stand in the line of battle against it. The plan was code-named A-140. The secrecy was absolute. It was paranoid. The construction took place at the Kure Naval Arsenal, hidden behind high walls. But walls weren't enough. The Navy bought up all the surrounding hillsides. They evicted the farmers. They built warehouses just to block the view of the dry dock. They hung massive sisal mats, thousands of them, around the gantry cranes, so that no one, not even the workers in the yard next door, could see the hull taking shape. Engineers were strip-searched entering and leaving the facility. Design documents were stamped top secret and kept in safes that required 3 different officers to open. They even lied about the size of the rivets. The rivets used to hold the massive armor plates together were enormous. But the supply orders listed them as standard size, just in case an American spy saw the paperwork. The result of this secrecy was a ghost. The Americans knew Japan was building something, but they didn't know what. US intelligence estimated the new Japanese battleships would be around 45,000 tons, maybe carrying 16-inch guns. They were wrong, dead wrong. When the Yamato was finally launched on August 8, 1940, it displaced 65,000 tons standard and nearly 72,000 tons fully loaded. It was the heaviest battleship in human history. It was wider than a Panama Canal lock. It was a floating fortress designed to take a pounding that would sink an entire squadron of lesser ships. But the real terror was the main battery, the Type 94 naval gun. Everything about these guns was monstrous. The bore was 46 centimeters, 18.1 inches. No other ship in the world carried guns this big. Each turret weighed 2,700 tons. To put that in perspective, one turret on the Yamato weighed more than an entire American destroyer. The barrel alone was 21 meters long. When it fired, the blast pressure was so intense that it could rip the skin off a man standing on the deck 20 yards away. The anti-aircraft gunners on the Yamato had to be protected in shielded enclosed mounts, not because of enemy fire, but because the shock wave from their own ship's main guns would kill them. The shells themselves were the size of a man. They weighed 3,200 pounds. They could be fired 42 kilometers. That's 26 miles. The Yamato could sit over the horizon, completely invisible, and drop a car-sized bomb onto the deck of an American carrier with mathematical precision. Or at least, that was the theory. The engineers at Kure had built a masterpiece. They had solved problems of buoyancy, stability, and hydrodynamics that Western engineers said were impossible. They created a bulbous bow, a protruding underwater nose, that reduced drag by 8%. It was a marvel of science. But they had made one fatal miscalculation. They were building the ultimate weapon for the year 1914, but the year was 1941, and the rules of war had changed forever. December 16, 1941. The Yamato is formally commissioned. 9 days earlier, the Japanese carrier fleet had attacked Pearl Harbor. In a few hours, aircraft had sunk the American battleship line. The irony was crushing. The very attack that started the war proved that the Yamato was obsolete before it even sailed. Battleships were too slow, they couldn't hide, they were vulnerable to air power. The aircraft carrier was the new queen of the ocean. So, the Yamato spent the war waiting. It became the flagship of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. It was a symbol. You don't risk the king in a game of chess unless you have to. While the lighter cruisers and destroyers fought in the savage night battles of Guadalcanal, the Yamato stayed in Truk Lagoon. It sat at anchor for nearly 2 years. The living conditions on board were shocking compared to the rest of the Japanese Navy. Most Japanese warships were cramped, hot, and smelled of oil and sweat. The Yamato had air conditioning. It had huge refrigerators. The officers had a salon with leather furniture. The galley served Western-style food, steaks, and cold beer. The sailors on the other ships, starving and fighting in the jungle heat, gave it a nickname, Hotel Yamato. It was an insult. The crew of the Yamato hated it. They were the elite. They had been hand-picked. They were the strongest, the smartest, the most disciplined sailors in the fleet, and they were being used as hotel staff. They polished the brass. They scrubbed the teak decks. They ran drills. But they didn't fight. The frustration boiled over. Ensign Yoshida Mitsuru, a radar officer on board, wrote in his diary about the shame. "We are the pride of the Navy, but we do nothing. The destroyers go out and don't come back. We stay here and eat white rice." In 1944, the Yamato finally saw combat at the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It fired its massive guns in anger for the first time. It helped sink an American escort carrier and a destroyer. But even then, it ran away. When a spread of torpedoes approached, the Yamato turned away, taking itself out of the battle. The sister ship, the Musashi, wasn't so lucky. At Leyte Gulf, the Musashi, the Yamato's twin, was swarmed by American planes. It took 19 torpedoes and 17 bomb hits. It capsized and sank. The Yamato watched its sister die. The crew knew then. The armor didn't matter. The 18-inch guns didn't matter. If the Americans owned the sky, the ship was just a target. A 72,000-ton target. April 1945. The Americans have landed on Okinawa. This is Japanese soil. The invasion force is massive. The typhoon of steel. In Tokyo, the mood is apocalyptic. The army is planning Ketsu-Goda, decisive defense of the homeland. They are training schoolgirls to fight with bamboo spears. They are preparing to sacrifice 100 million people. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Hirohito is briefed on the defense of Okinawa. He asks the chief of the Naval General Staff a simple question. "I hear the army is fighting hard, but what is the Navy doing? Are there no more ships?" That question was a death sentence. The Navy could not tell the Emperor, "We are hiding our ships to save them." They had to act. Admiral Toyoda, the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, drafted the order. Operation 10 Go. 10 means heaven. Go means operation. It was a mission to heaven. The plan was technically complex but strategically blunt. The Yamato, escorted by the light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers, would sail to Okinawa. They would arrive on April 8th. They would beach the Yamato on the coast near the Kadena airfield. The ship would become an unsinkable gun battery. The 18-inch guns would blast the American landing beaches until the ammunition was gone. Then the crew would join the army infantry and fight to the death. When the order reached the fleet, the commanders were furious. Captain Kosaku Aruga, the captain of the Yamato, was a combat veteran. He knew this was impossible. Without air cover, they would never reach Okinawa. Vice Admiral Ito, the task force commander, refused the order initially. He argued that it was a waste of 4,000 lives and a waste of fuel that the destroyers needed. "Let us go out and hunt convoys," he argued. "Let us do something useful." But the order came from the Emperor's inquiry. There was no debating the Emperor. On April 5th, the briefing was held aboard the Yamato. The officers argued. Some shouted. Then the Chief of Staff stood up and said quietly, "This is the logic of the situation. If the Yamato survives while the Empire falls, how will we explain it to the spirits of the dead? The Navy must die with the nation." Silence fell over the room. Ito closed his eyes. "I understand," he said. "We will go." April 6, 1945, Tokuyama Bay. The fueling began. Even this was a tragedy. Japan was so starved for oil that they had to scrape the bottom of the barrels from other ships. The Yamato needed huge amounts of fuel oil. Officially, they were given enough for a one-way trip. Unofficially, the depot commander at Tokuyama felt pity for them. He emptied the tanks. He gave them enough fuel to get to Okinawa and maybe, just maybe, get back to Sasebo. It was a gesture of hope in a hopeless time. At 3:00 p.m. the final ceremony began. The sick were ordered off the ship. The midshipmen, the cadets, the 17- and 18-year-olds who had just arrived were ordered to leave. They begged to stay. "We want to die with the ship," they screamed. Captain Aruga was firm. "You are the future," he told them. "You must live to rebuild Japan." They were dragged, crying, onto the transport boats. The seasoned sailors watched them go. They knew they would never see them again. That evening, the sake ration was distributed. This was rare. Alcohol was strictly rationed. But tonight, the rules were gone. The men sat on the polished teak decks. They sang traditional songs, Umi Yukaba. "If I go away to the sea, I shall return a corpse awash." They packed their personal belongings, photos of wives, letters from children. They put them in wooden boxes to be sent home before the ship left the harbour. Ensign Yoshida remembered the atmosphere. It wasn't fearful. It was strangely calm. "We had passed beyond fear," he wrote. "We were already dead men walking. The only thing left was to do it well." At 16, downward the anchor was weighed. The massive chain rattled up the horsepipe for the last time. The Yamato turned its bow toward the Bungo Strait. Behind it trailed the light cruiser Yahagi, and the 8 destroyers, Isakaze, Hamakaze, Yukikaze, Kasumi, Hatsushimo, Asashimo, Fuyuzuki, and Suzutsuki. 10 ships against the entire United States Navy. They moved into the night, dark shapes against a darker sea. Submarines were already waiting. The USS Threadfin and USS Hackleback spotted them almost immediately. They didn't attack. They were too small to hurt the Yamato. Instead, they radioed the coordinates. Target detected. Heading southwest, speed 22 knots. The trap was set. Dawn. April 7, 1945. The weather was miserable. Low clouds, rain squalls. Visibility was poor. Admiral Ito hoped the weather would save him. If the American planes couldn't fly, he might make it to Okinawa. But the Americans had radar, and they had determination. Task Force 58, commanded by Admiral Mark Mitcher, was positioned east of Okinawa. Mitcher was a pioneer of naval aviation. He had been waiting for this chance. The U.S. battleships, the old dreadnoughts raised from the mud of Pearl Harbor, wanted a crack at the Yamato. They wanted a surface duel. Big guns against big guns. But Mitcher wasn't going to play fair. "Launch everything," he ordered. At 10:00 a.m., the flight decks of the American carriers exploded with activity. USS Hornet, USS Bennington, USS Belleau Wood, USS Essex, USS Bunker Hill, F-6F Hellcat fighters, SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. Wave after wave took off. In total, 386 aircraft headed north. It was a swarm of locusts. The pilots were nervous but excited. This was the big one. They had studied the recognition guides. They knew the silhouette, the massive pagoda mast, the huge turrets. The weather cleared slightly over the East China Sea. At 12:03 p.m., the radar operators on the Yamato saw the screen light up. Contact, 100 kilometers, large formation. The alarm klaxon sounded. Air raid! Air raid! Port and starboard! Men rushed to their battle stations. They put on their helmets. They tightened their life vests. Captain Aruga climbed into the Air Defense Command Tower. He ordered the ship to increase speed to 24 knots. He ordered the flag raised. The huge rising sun flag, the battle ensign. This was it. 12:37 p.m. The first wave strikes. The Americans are coordinated. They are ruthless. The Helldivers come in first, screaming down from the clouds. Their job is to suppress the anti-aircraft fire. They drop armor-piercing bombs. 2 bombs hit the Yamato almost immediately. One smashes the aft deck. One blows out the radar room. The smoke begins to rise. But the real killers are the Avengers, the torpedo bombers. They come in low and slow, just above the waves. The Japanese AA fire is intense. The sky is filled with black puffs of flak. The Yamato fires its sanshiki shells, the massive beehive rounds from the main guns. They create huge cones of fire, burning the paint off the American planes. But they don't stop them. The Avengers drop their fish. The pilots have been briefed, attack the port side. If they hit both sides, the ship will just settle lower in the water but stay upright. If they hit one side, it will capsize. 4 torpedoes hit the Yamato in the first 10 minutes, all on the port side. The explosions are deafening. The ship shudders like a kicked dog. Water rushes into the outer void spaces. The ship lists 5 degrees to port. Admiral Ito orders counterflooding. This is the cruel calculus of naval warfare. To correct the list, they have to flood the starboard engine rooms. But there are men in there. The order is given. The valves are opened. 300 men in the starboard boiler rooms and engine spaces are drowned instantly by their own seawater. They die to buy the ship an extra hour of life. The list corrects. The ship straightens up. But she is slower now, 18 knots, and the second wave is coming. Meanwhile, the escort destroyers are dying. The Hamikaze takes a torpedo and snaps in half. She sinks in minutes. The Isokaze is dead in the water. The light cruiser Yahagi, the shield of the fleet, is being torn apart. She takes 7 torpedoes. She is stopped, burning, sinking. The Yamato is alone. 1003 p.m. The second and third waves arrive. The Yamato is a smoking ruin. The upper decks are a slaughterhouse. The anti-aircraft gunners have been mowed down by machine gun fire from the Hellcats. The decks are slick with blood, oil, and rain. The massive 18-inch guns are silent. They can't traverse fast enough to hit the planes. They are useless statues. Captain Aruga is tied to the binnacle on the bridge to keep from falling as the ship lists again. The Americans are relentless. They circle like wolves. They see the ship is limping. They line up for the kill. 3 more torpedoes hit the port side. The list worsens. 15 degrees. The rudder jams. The Yamato is stuck in a hard left turn. It is sailing in a giant circle, vomiting black smoke. Communications are cut. The executive officer, Commander Nomura, crawls to the bridge. He reports that the flooding is uncontrollable. The pumps are broken. The counter-flooding tanks are full. There is nothing left to do. At 2:00 p.m., the list hits 20 degrees. The floor is becoming a wall. Admiral Ito stands up. He shakes the hand of the captain. "You have fought well," he says. "I will stay," Ito says. "Stop the operation. Save the men." Ito walks into his sea cabin. He locks the door. He does not come out. Captain Aruga orders, "Abandon ship." But it is too late. The ship is rolling over. Men are sliding across the deck, smashing into the railings. The ocean rushes up to meet them. As the ship rolls past 90 degrees, the laws of physics take over. The 18-inch turrets are held in place by gravity. There are no bolts strong enough to hold 3,000 tons upside down. With a groan of tearing metal, the turrets fall out of the ship. They splash into the sea. And then, the end. 2023 p.m. The fires reach the number 1 magazine. The shells stored there, hundreds of tons of high explosives, detonate all at once. The explosion is apocalyptic. It is visible from Kagoshima, 20 miles away. The pillar of smoke rises 20,000 feet. It obliterates the ship. The Yamato does not sink intact. It is torn into 2 massive pieces. The shockwave kills American pilots flying a mile away. Debris rains down for minutes. Metal, wood, flesh. Then, silence. The rain continues to fall. The oil slick spreads. Of the 3,332 men, only 269 are pulled from the water. Admiral Ito is gone. Captain Aruga is gone. The Yamato is gone. The wreckage lies at a depth of 340 meters, 1,100 feet. It was discovered in the 1980s. It is a grave. The bow section stands upright, defiant. The chrysanthemum crest still shines gold through the silt. The main hull is upside down, a broken spine. The massive propellers are bent, evidence of the speed at which she hit the bottom. It is a quiet place now. But the question remains, why? Why did they sail? Why did they build it? The Yamato was the pinnacle of an era that was already over. It was the ultimate expression of the battleship age. It was built on the idea that sheer size and armor could win a war. But technology moves faster than steel. A $50,000 airplane destroyed a 100 million ship. A 19-year-old kid from Kansas dropped a torpedo that sank the pride of the samurai. In Japan, the Yamato has become a legend, not because it won, but because of how it died. It represents the tragedy of the war, the waste, the sacrifice. It is the space battleship Yamato in anime resurrected to save the world. But the real Yamato could not save anything. It was a sacrificial lamb, dressed in 18 inches of armor. The surviving officers, men like Yoshida Mitsuru, spent the rest of their lives haunted by the scream of the diving planes. Yoshida wrote, "We were the chosen ones. We were supposed to be the shield of the empire. In the end, we were just targets." On April 7th, every year, a memorial service is held. They pour sake into the sea. They remember the 3,000 men who went down with the hotel, the men who drowned in the engine rooms so the guns could fire for 5 more minutes, the men who wrote letters they knew would never be answered. The battleship Yamato was the greatest ship ever built, and it was the greatest mistake ever made. Its destruction marked the end of the battleship era. The ocean belongs to the submarine and the carrier now. The giants are gone, and they are never coming back. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of conflict, please like and subscribe to Conflict Historian. We are building a library of the forgotten, the brave, and the tragic. Tell us in the comments, was Operation 10 Go an act of bravery or a criminal waste of life? I'll see you in the next one.